Hello and welcome to the Istranti Top 10 Most Likely Unseen Issues for the CIMA Operational Case Study of May 2019, where we are looking at the pre-seen company VitaMine. In this video, we'll be taking a look at what I consider to be the most likely issues that will come up in your exam in May. So what is the basis of my choice for this particular set of top 10 issues? Well, one of the things that I consider is the focus in the pre-seen. So what I mean by that is how much space is devoted to a particular issue in the pre-seen and the degree of importance that the examiner will attach to that particular thing. And an interesting thing here is that sometimes there is a lot of space devoted to a particular issue. It's brought up and specifically mentioned in the pre-seen. But what's interesting is the stuff that you can sort of interpret by reading in between the lines and what the pre-seen is sort of hinting at. I'll be including my thoughts on those aspects too. We're also going to be considering strategic importance of various issues. So I did a series of 6 videos analysing the pre-seen page by page. And that's kind of informing the focus in the pre-seen section. I've also done a strategic analysis, which is a video where we look at VitaMine using the rational planning model, come up with a business strategy, and that culminated in kind of a SWOT analysis. And in that video, we got a good insight and a good amount of depth of understanding of particular issues that VitaMine might face. So those issues that have a strategic importance based on that SWOT analysis will be kind of a key aspect of the top 10 that make it into this video. And also I'm going on my experience. This will be the 10th operational case study sitting that I've produced the top 10 issues for. I've done the pre-seen analysis videos for, strategic analysis for, that I've written mocks for. This is my 10th one, so my experience is actually quite valuable because I know what kind of questions come out of a particular sort of pre-seen, and you can base that on past exams. Of every sitting, we always look through the past exams to see what topics have come up, and we look at actual exam topics against the top 10 issues, and most of the time we get 6 or 7 pretty much bang on. So there's a pretty high success rate for our sort of guesses in the top 10 issues. Some typical issues come up again and again. So if it takes up a big part of the syllabus, for example, cost accounting, particular elements of cost accounting, easily examinable, really important. So they're more likely to come up than other issues. And also we're thinking about how easy it is to write issues on a particular subject. So I'd say, as I mentioned, I write some of the OCS mocks that Istranti release. So I've written a lot of questions based on a lot of pre-seens. And I can tell you from experience that the easier something is to write a question on, the more likely I am to write that question. It just makes everyone's life a lot easier. So those are the kind of considerations that are going into my choices for this top 10 issues video. So what can you do to prepare? How can this video help you in your preparation for the exam? Well, for one, once we've identified 10 key areas, you can prepare key models in those 10 key areas from the pre-seen information. So for most of these issues, we'll suggest key models or key theory that you can use if you get a question on this particular topic. So what you can do is take that model, go back to the pre-seen and apply it. So for example, if it's the 4 P's of the marketing mix, and you go back to the pre-seen, you apply it, and you've done some of the groundwork already. So when you come to the exam, then you've got a good start on that because you can just apply the work that you've already done. The key point there, though, remember that you must adapt all models to points in the unseen. So, for example, you do your marketing mix, you apply that to the information we have in the pre-seen, but the unseen gives you some new information about a pricing strategy or something like that. You have to update the model. You have to adapt the model so that it fits for the new information you've been given in the unseen. Another thing you could do is practice mock exams that cover these issues. Now, as I've said, I write some of the mock exams for Astranti. We have a whole team of people that work on our mocks, and they are very closely aligned with this video and looking through past papers. We pick out the topics that come up again and again. We look at the pre-scene and figure out what we think are the most likely issues, and we put those questions in our mock exams in an attempt to get you best prepared. And if there's a chance that you do a mock exam and maybe you get 2 or 3 questions over the course of 3 mocks that are very similar to something you've got in the real exam, then you'll be in a pretty good position to answer those questions in the real exam. Something else you can do is find relevant real life examples. This is something that you can get from the industry analysis as well. So another video we have is the industry analysis that's recorded by another James Green, and he writes the industry pack, which is about 100 pages long document on the actual VMS industry. And at the end of that are 25 real life industry examples that you can use in your exam to show the examiner that you have a wider understanding of how the industry works. So you can take the sample paragraphs, the 25 sample paragraphs that we put in that document, learn them and repeat them in your exam where necessary. And how that relates to this video is that once we've given you 10 key areas, then you know some of the 10 of the 25 examples, they're broadly arranged across the 10 key issues. So there's how that overlaps. You can learn typical key points. So for example, if you get a question on whether or not VitaMine should adopt activity-based costing, then you might get a question on the key points of that. So you would learn typical advantages and disadvantages of implementing activity-based costing. They're pretty standard. Obviously, you need to apply them to the scenario, but that's certainly something you want to revise. So once you've watched this video, you go away, remind yourself of the advantages and disadvantages of activity-based costing, because hint, it does come up in the top 10. Then you're going to be in a good position, and you're going to limit the amount of revision you have to do. Rather than learning all of P1 or all of costing, you can just focus on really understanding activity-based costing and how that differs to absorption costing. You can also be prepared for which models to use to support the particular issue. So as I said, for each issue, we suggest relevant theory and relevant models that you can use for a given issue. So going into the exam, you may not have adapted it, or you may not have applied it to the pre-scene yet, but you know that you can use, perhaps you get a question on competitivity in the market. You know to use a Pestel analysis to help you with your question there. Perhaps you get a question relating to corporate social responsibility or ethics, and the appropriate model to use there might be Mendelow's matrix to understand how the issue impacts all your different stakeholders in different ways. Okay, so that's enough of the introduction. Let's get on with our issues. The issues aren't in any particular order. So this is number 10. It doesn't mean it's the least likely to come up or the most. Number 1 isn't the most likely to come up. Any of these are as likely to come up as any other. So they just happen to be in this order. And number 10 is an acquisition. Now, the reason I've picked this is because acquisitions, business combinations, consolidated accounts, as you may remember, is a key F1 topic. And you will have been examined on that in your F1 exam, but you still need to be aware of how it works in the context of the operational case study. In addition to that, looking at the pre-scene, it is specifically mentioned as a potential strategy, given that we have a highly fragmented industry at the moment. A highly fragmented industry means that we've got lots of smaller individual companies operating in the industry, no major competitor. I think the largest competitor by market share only has 7% market share or something like that. There's also a specific mention of a company called VitaSite, which is an overseas retailer that VitaMine sell to, who have an online store and they sell VitaMine products on their website. We know VitaMine don't currently have a website, so buying a company that has a website is a real potential opportunity for them to to increase the channels they have, the sales channels they have. And, look at the name, it's called VitaSite. It's damn close already to VitaMine. So I think this is quite a likely one. It's hinted at quite strongly in the pre-scene. So what are the likely issues? Well, it could be the very early stages and the finance manager or the finance director are having discussions and proposing to invest in a particular company, and maybe it will be a financial assessment of that company. So they've identified a company in the market. Now, it might be a company like VitaSite, which is slightly different. They're an online retailer. It might be a company that is very similar to VitaMine itself. Maybe it's similar, but somewhere else in Southeast Asia. Maybe they have the capacity to produce slightly different products. Depends what the kind of strategic motivation for the acquisition will be, and there can be a number of different ones, but all I know is I'm pretty sure there's going to be an acquisition question. So a financial assessment would be you're given a series of ratios of a potential subsidiary or associate, and you're doing some kind of ratio analysis. So looking at their liquidity, their working capital, maybe their gearing, to see whether it would be a worthwhile investment and whether you'd get a return on that investment. It could be slightly more technical. So that is kind of maybe a business test of your business knowledge, but it could be a test of your financial reporting knowledge. So the actual process and accounting standards and requirements for the creation of an associate. So, combining the two entities, establishing control, all those sorts of things. Same thing with a subsidiary and the difference between the two. So obviously a subsidiary is a business combination, associate is done using the equity method. So, a range of different issues that can be sort of picked up on with regards to an acquisition. So here are the things that you need to talk about in an acquisition question. So, and of course, this is assuming that this is what is asked for. So key things on an acquisition question, you would talk about the impact on producing financial statements if you are at the stage where you're going to make the acquisition. So if you're going to create a subsidiary or an associate, then you talk about the impact of that. So having to produce consolidated accounts. If it's a subsidiary, the sort of nature of the shareholding. So whether it's 80% or whether it's 100%, what impact that has. You talk about establishing control. So what it takes to establish control over an entity. The idea is that you don't need to get too technical with it. There won't be any calculations involved or anything like that. It's more about the kind of theory behind business combinations and group accounts and what the impact would be on financial statements. The idea is that CIMA tested your sort of the calculations of that in the F1 exam. So now it's more about the kind of general business application of a business combination. There might be, it might be more general question, not just the impact on the financial statements, but the impact on the business or of the business organization or of the combination on the company's resources, or on the funding, or on the company's strategy. So is this merger or acquisition going to significantly change the company's strategy? Does it mean the company have to revisit their kind of strategy and incorporate this new element? How is it going to be funded? Is there sufficient funding to be able to do it? What is going to be the impact on cash flow, etc.? What does it mean that we can't invest in? But if we're investing in a subsidiary, what's the opportunity cost of that perhaps? What resources do we need to be able to make this investment a success? And you would also probably want to talk about the risk because it could be tacked on or related to a kind of risk-based decision question. And so you would want to talk about the risk involved in the investment, particularly if you've done some analysis of figures and it turns out the company has some inherent problems from a financial perspective. So the main theory you're going to use then would be the relevant accounting standards for business combinations, group accounts, financial reporting. Given what has been presented in the pre-scene, I would certainly recommend revisiting that area of F1. Another one you might want to look at is organizational structure from E1, just sort of understanding sort of structures of organizations and potentially the impact of an acquisition and that might lead into a question about human resources and how the acquisition could impact human resources. Are you taking on new staff? Is it an acquisition where you are merging offices together, creating new offices? Or is the subsidiary going to operate independently? And so you need to talk about the kind of differences between approaches there. And of course, if it's a question where you're doing some financial analysis, you're going to need to know how to use your key ratios. So your profitability ratios, your activity or working capital ratios, liquidity, solvency, all those key ones, so you can understand and do a good analysis of a company's finances. So just before we finish, I'd like to take you through some of the products we offer in the entire case study course. So this is just one element of the whole course, and I'll just go through the other things that we offer here. So to start with, we have a study text that is devoted to the operational case study, and that's split into two parts. The first part is a guide to how to pass the case study exam. It's full of exam tips, exam strategy, time management, preparation and planning, how to write to the marking criteria, all those kinds of things. And then part two of that study text is a condensed version of all the relevant material of the kind of things that come up in the exam over and over. So essentially it's the most popular topics that have come up in past exams from E1, P1 and F1. And so those are the two study texts available for the operational case study course. And we also do course videos that are roughly based around that first study text. So the exam advice and the timing, the planning, all the things that go in to preparing an exam strategy. We have an entire series of videos that go through that in detail. So if you're more of a visual learner rather than a reader, you can check those out and they'll be a great help in getting you past the exams. The pre-scene analysis is the series of 6 videos where we look through the actual pre-scene in minute detail, going through every paragraph, making notes and looking how we can use this information to better prepare for the exam when the exam comes up. Separate from that is an industry analysis, and that is a document and a video as well. So the two are in tandem, and the document is about 100 pages looking at the industry in which the company exists. So for example, if the case company is in the car and they're a car manufacturer, then the industry analysis would be an analysis of the car industry. And that's like I say, that's a large document where we break it down, and we're essentially, the point of that is we're doing the research for you to save you time and energy. And the really great thing about the industry analysis is that we include 25 industry examples at the end. So things that happened in the real industry. So the example I just used, it being the car industry. If we were doing the car industry, we'd take 25 examples from the car industry of relevant news and things that have happened to companies and to the industry and consumers or whatever it is. As when we get from those 25 examples, we write a little exam paragraph, the kind of thing that you can literally rehearse and put it in your exam if it's relevant. Examiners do like to see that you have a wider industry knowledge, and so putting in a little example like that can get you good marks. We do mock exams. For the operational case study, we write 3 mock exams, and we have a free mini mock that you can do that are based on the actual CIMA style case study. So they're computer based, they're online, and they're timed, and it's as close to the real thing as we can possibly make it. And that's a really good way to prepare you for the exam. Each time we write our questions based on the pre-scene that's just been released. And with those mock exams, you can get marking and feedback, and that's really essential for you to, if you do your mock exams, I would recommend also getting marking and feedback, because you can then see where you went wrong or what you did well. And the feedback allows you to improve on that. Really important part that a lot of students skip over, and they really struggle in the exam because they weren't prepared, they hadn't done the mock exams. We have masterclasses that run over a course of 2 separate weekends, running up to the exam, and they're essentially a live online class webinar where our tutor will go through with you the kind of a revision one where we'd start recapping on the most important topics, from the E1, P1 and F1 syllabus, and one will be sort of more exam focused. And then finally, we offer pass guarantee, which means that if you meet all the requirements, so you use all these different products that are available and you fill in a checklist to say that you've done those, but you still don't pass your exam, you're unfortunate or whatever, then we will allow you to resit our course, to take our course again at no extra charge. That's really great for people who are perhaps taking it for the first time and they don't quite pass, but they need to take the course again. If you've gone through that scheme and you've done everything that we ask you to do, then we'll give you the course again for free.